I was a Christian for a couple of years. But when I started doing the emotional healing work, then I started questioning my belief system. I really started taking a step back and to say, hang on, the story I'm hearing here just doesn't match up. What is the truth here?
Where did you grow up Christian? Because I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, you have your reverend designation, if that's the right terminology. How did that come about? Like, what's your experience with Christianity? Where is it at now, especially now that you've been into the non-religious spirituality? What's the story?
I met Zach. He was already a Christian. As you know, the philosophy of Christian, you've got to marry a Christian. So I started going to church. I would say at a time I really felt touched by spirit in church. So I decided to be a Christian. So I was a Christian for a couple of years. But then, on and off, I've questioned some of the teachings myself, right? I don't understand, the bigger picture, even the judgment, right? Like, why would God judge? Like, I've had questions around the teachings, but I know part of it is just, okay, I'm going to just accept because I'm a Christian. But when I started doing the emotional healing work, then I started questioning my belief system. I really started taking a step back and to say, hang on, what is the truth here? Am I just taking it on because that's the right thing to do as a Christian? Or what do I really believe? Like, I believe God is all-encompassing love, but the story I'm hearing here just doesn't match up currently. So that's kind of how I started stepping away. I do believe Jesus exists. I do believe in divine. Just that some of the way that teaching has been passed on, it just doesn't fit with my truth anymore. So that's kind of when I started stepping away. In terms of my reverendship, I met my teacher, Jyoti, a year after I met John of God. So that, like I mentioned, a lot of different teachers started showing up for me. And I met her at an event and kept in touch with her because I started having dreams, like I had all those experiences that I couldn't explain. So she was someone that I've gone to and asked for advice. And my teacher's really good at interpreting dreams as well at a time. So she'll tell me, like, when I dream about something that's very lucid and vivid, and she'll tell me, like, this is what the dream is telling me, but which makes a lot of sense every time when she interprets my dream. So I kept in touch with her, and then she's the one who encouraged me to look at the program called Ministry of Walking Prayer, which is the teaching of the indigenous people, right? So she said that perhaps that way it could start expanding my knowledge in this realm and also to learn from their wisdom. The program is conducted by her school, the school that she started. So, I told her that give me a few days, but, my experience has been when something I know I'm supposed to take it, I know the answer really quickly. So I made a decision really quickly, sign up for it. So it was a 2 year program.
This was in Canada?
No, so the program runs in the US. Basically, it's an online and in-person program. So every month there's a module online that we need to study. There are books to read. The teachers that are teaching that module will be on the calls. So we'll be on the calls with them so that we can ask questions. Jyoti's on the call every once a month as well with us, as we go through our process of growth. It's fascinating. I remember the topic death and dying was kind of the time when Trump got elected. I remember I was like, okay, how is all this relating to what's happening and him, so it's been fascinating. Every month something shows up in relation to my life or globally that resonates with the topic that we were learning. So 2 years of online, but every once a year we are to fly in to this retreat center that they hold a retreat for us, where we will go through different processes, healing processes, like Maitri breath work, the sweat lodge, just different experiences that they create for us to connect more with spirit, with the teachings of the indigenous people.
It's called the Ministry of
Walking Prayer.
Walking Prayer. And this is a blend of Christianity and indigenous teachings?
No, they fall under a church just because of the way they can set up in the US, but they are teaching the wisdom of indigenous people.
So you Reverend, is it Reverend Hood or Reverend Ship?
Well, I call it Ship, but I'm not
Reverend
sure.
Ship? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
The Reverend
myself.
Ship is in indigenous wisdom.
Yes.
Is it from a particular culture or group?
So the school, my understanding from my teacher, they have 5 different lineages that comes through the school. So there is a little bit of the Tibetan type, the natives, I mean the indigenous people in North America. I know there's a teaching along a lineage in Africa. So from my understanding, it's through 5 different lineages that comes through the school. So, you learn about plant wisdom, like communicating with plants, right? That's what the indigenous people do. They actually can communicate with all beings on this planet. So you learn all these different things. Every month there's a different topic or theme that we cover.
That's really fascinating. I had no idea that kind of experience existed. 2 years program.
I know I didn't go in because of the reverendship to be a reverend. I went in because of just knowing that I wanted to understand more what's happening for me and my experiences. At the same time, I've always had an affinity for the indigenous people. I can't explain. I know when I first visited Canada when I was 13, I was very drawn to everything that was created around indigenous people. Even throughout my university years in Missouri, I will go to powwow events. Like I'm drawn to their events, not knowing. So when this opportunity came up, that was another reason. I'm like, oh, great. Maybe I could discover more about what that's about. So I went into more with that intention. And of course, it's blown my mind away with all the different experiences that I've had. And I think when I was ordained, it was finally, I understood the importance of the ordination. It was actually then I kind of like, okay, hang on. I'm going to be ordained as a minister. There is a responsibility for me to take, this on. There's a sense of responsibility. Before that was just a lot about myself.
I was under the assumption that the reverendhood had to do with your time in the Christian religion.
Yeah,
They're
no.
completely separate and like very spaced apart too, and
Yes.
time wise. Is this where you were introduced to shamanic work?
I've been drawn to shamanic work too when I was in Malaysia before I came out. Drawn to, but I haven't really experienced it there, right? I bought books, I started reading, I was curious about it. And like I said, I somehow had this affinity to, their teachings. And I would say it's the 2 years where I got to really experience a lot more of it.
What was your exposure to shamanic work in Malaysia?
I like I said, there's no experience. I actually bought books. Somehow I was attracted. I remember buying a book about shamanism. Like how do you practice, connecting with your spirit animal, and read about it and wanted to practice. Like I was just drawn, that pretty much on my own. I didn't have any guidance around it in Malaysia, but I was just very drawn to it.
When I was reading the work of Dr. Brian Weiss, who's very famous for past life regression therapy, he said that when we have a very naturally inclined interest in something that we don't have an explanation for in this lifetime, it usually or more often than not can be directly linked to a past life. And having done a lot of past life work yourself, did you get answers when you explore that?
Yes, I know I've been a shaman before. I got to have a glimpse of what happened as a shaman. This was more when I was in South America. And again, this is where, experiences that's coming, there's no explanation behind it. I know I've also done a lot of work in the Tibetan side because I started seeing a lot of Tibetan teachings started unfolding. Or I have knowings, like things that I started knowing and understanding. And when I started reading more about it, it's like, oh, it's actually Tibetan teaching. That's what's coming through. Yeah, so I have had opportunity to really connect with some of this. I mean, if we are going to talk about all the stories, I have so many stories that you can't explain.
I might have to do another episode just on that.
Right.